if you're looking for something to be thankful for, you can be thankful that you don't live in a West Texas oil field town. Imagine driving a manure spreader in front of a paper mill on a hot summer day and running over a skunk. That's pretty much the experience. These things are just giant behemoths. Nobody drills anymore. The wells have all been drilled a long, long time ago. And it seems like production is maybe 20% of the existing wellheads. I'm not a petroleum engineer, but I used to fly with one. His job was to clean up slop oil so that they could put it into the pipeline. You know, take the salt water and the sand out of it, get it to where it was presentable and the pipeline company would accept it. He married a gal whose father owned half of West Texas, and that was his first engineering job out of college. He hated it. Hated living near the wells, hated the smells, hated the loneliness. He learned how to fly and eventually got hired by the airline, and I spent a lot of time flying with him. I really enjoyed his stories about the oil fields. But when you drive around in West Texas, everywhere by these wells, there's warning signs about the deadly, dangerous, poisonous gases that will kill you. Fun things like benzene and butane and methane and sulfur dioxide and hydrogen sulfide and carbon monoxide and a few inert gases, and they just make this unpleasant aroma part of the atmosphere, part of the backdrop of being in a West Texas town. If you've never been to one, it's probably worth the trip just to smell the smells. But man. So I learned something, that some of these big holding tanks have windsocks on them, which was kind of comforting. I could see the windsocks all over. But the reason the windsocks are on the tanks is to prevent the workers from standing downwind of the concentrated gases and falling victim to their lethality. So two things I'm not really certain about when it comes to oil production. And first is, what causes some of these wells to be idle while others are pumping? Have the wells run dry, or is there an economic threshold where it doesn't make sense to run certain wells because of the energy cost to extract the oil? Or maybe they run them seasonally? If there wasn't such a global downturn in energy consumption because of COVID, would more than 20% of these wells be pumping? That's just one of the things I don't know. The other thing that I don't know is, I can remember when I first started flying for the airline, when you'd cross West Texas at the nighttime sky or in the dark, you'd see methane burn off almost everywhere. About every square mile or so, there's one of these refinery facilities or CO2 recovery facilities or any number of process plants owned by all these different oil companies. And they engage in whatever business it is that they do to make the oil into usable products. You know, the distillation columns, the compression, the chillers, the lots and lots of equipment, miles of pipeline at these facilities. What do they do with the methane? They used to burn it off in huge standing stacks. Flames would be shooting 200 or 300 feet up into the air, and I just don't see that anymore. Or at least I don't see it on this particular Paramotor flight. I did see one stack with a short flame, maybe, if I had to guess, 30 feet tall, but that's nothing. It pales in comparison to what I remember from the late 1980s and the early 90s flying over West Texas. Well, if you have any idea, please leave me a comment. I'd like to learn that. Well, this particular section of county here is in the county of Yoakum. No relation to Dwight Yoakam, the Guitars and Cadillacs guy. But a large section of the county was deeded to some people in 1916, according to the historical marker. They tried to ranch cattle on it. And it was a economic disaster coming into the Great Depression. way too many farms, not enough people to eat all the food the farms could produce. And they engaged in a contract with a wildcat driller who came out and found oil near Denver City, Texas. Well, it wasn't long and the little tiny community of Denver City had turned into a bit of a boom town, if you will, with all the well drilling and all the oil production. But I'll tell you, it's a sad place now. As you drive around, there's really not much other than Mexican restaurants and one grocery store and a couple gas stations and a bunch of dilapidated houses that were probably built in the 1930s to 1950s, if I had to guess. A livable place, except for the dang oil field byproduct smells. Ugh, man, get me out of here.
Hillbilly music on the lonely streets that I call home. Yeah, my guitars, Cadillacs, and hillbilly music is the only thing that keeps me hanging on. It's the only thing that keeps me hanging on. It's the only thing that keeps me hanging on.
Oh, and one last thing. If your life should find you driving from the White Sands Missile Range to Denver City, Texas, be sure to stop at McGinn's Pistachio Land just to the north of Alamogordo and get some pistachio brittle.